I think it's very interesting to see the more established players discussing the regulated side of digital assets and the potential applications and benefits of integrating distributed architectures into market infrastructure. Because you could build a better apple cart by basically integrating a blockchain or distributed architecture into how you're building your market infrastructure and eliminate a lot of these sort of layers that currently exist in market infrastructure that aren't necessarily needed anymore.
Why is Prometheum proposing custody Ether as a digital asset security?
The goal is to be able to support the largest and most liquid digital assets. It's been said that Bitcoin is not a security, so then you start from number 2 and go there. Ethereum is number 2, and it's our belief that almost the overwhelming majority of digital assets, obviously everything ex-Bitcoin, is a security. So we intend to be able to support the largest and most liquid tokens and look forward to being able to add additional tokens to support in the near future. Now, when you look at the space as a whole, digital assets is a broad category. One component is investment contracts, what people will call virtual currency, and we call investment contract digital asset securities. But that's just one component. If we go to another spot, there's the idea of tokenization. Tokenization is really just securities on a blockchain, and you need an ecosystem licensed under the securities laws for digital assets in order to be able to support those assets. Prometheum is arguably the only ecosystem that can support public trading, clearance, settlement, and custody of tokenized assets, which are basically tokenized securities. So that's another major segment of an area we'll be able to deal with, and I think going forward for the digital asset industry, that's where we'll see a majority of the growth in 2024.
How does Prometheum envision its role in shaping the digital asset market structure?
The integration of distributed architectures into market infrastructure, I think, is really the future of markets. Meaning there's efficiencies that are not enabled and sort of made capable by integrating blockchains, distributed architectures, whatever you want to call it, into how markets operate. And essentially, Prometheum is probably arguably the leader when it comes to that integration. And we have an ecosystem that is basically licensed for digital asset securities. Digital asset securities is a broad category. It includes investment contract digital assets, virtual currency, but it also includes any 33 Act based security, which includes equities, debt, options, etc., which basically means that Prometheum has achieved in some sense, a major milestone in that we are a ecosystem that can publicly trade securities that essentially can do instantaneous settlement. And I think that's the future of where everyone wants to go in the industry. We're seeing a proposal to move from T2 to T1. Obviously, that's causing a stir, but I think we're beyond that.
How does Prometheum plan to address the needs and requirements of institutional investors in digital assets?
We've seen institutions really sort of embrace the space now that they have the ability to generate revenues through things like the Bitcoin ETF. Basically, it allows them to generate revenue in a compliant mechanism by arguably wrapping a 20th century securities wrapper around a 21st century asset. But I think this is just the first foray, and it'll be sort of the indicator of larger things to come. And as institutions want to participate in the space, there needs to be a few things. One, you need to have the ability such that they can feel comfortable from a regulatory and compliance perspective. And two, you actually have to have the market infrastructure that allows that to occur, that allows basically those assets that are tokenized to be empowered. Because I think that's where institutions are going to engage with the space. And in order for a tokenized asset to be empowered, you have to have the ability to trade it publicly, which also means you have to have the ability to do what's after the trade is made, meaning clearance, settlement, and custody. And Prometheum's ecosystem can allow for public trading of a tokenized asset and does the clearance, settlement, and custody. So we feel that we very much empower the institutions in their participation in the space, because as they engage and want to issue these assets, we basically make sure that they can be liquid, traded, cleared, settled, and custody thereafter.
What is the roadmap for Prometheum's custodial services?
We'll be able to add additional assets, and the next step is actually to introduce trading, first institutional and then retail. And once that happens, basically you have a compliant ecosystem for digital assets that can allow for public trading. That could be both available to institutional and retail investors. And really what you're doing is just creating the market infrastructure needed for digital assets really to be embraced by institutions and basically be regulated under the securities laws.
Where does Prometheum fit in with the tokenization of traditional markets?
JPM has Onyx and the token, which is an internal mechanism by which to do the cash side of it. Our focus is on the investment side. We view when people issue tokenized assets where people are raising money and selling them to the public, it's a different mechanism than when they're using a coin internally to basically be able to do cash settlements. So essentially, when you have, let's say, any major virtual currency besides for Bitcoin, or you have anyone issuing some sort of traditional security via a token, those are the assets we'll support, basically on the investment side. Those discussions, when in regards specifically to JPM and Onyx, I believe it's an internal token, not meant for the public to use. It's just meant to basically introduce efficiencies by having a more streamlined cash settlement. Now, overall, I think what you're seeing, though, is people issuing assets and people using tokenization as a means to introduce efficiencies, whether that's by creating securities that are meant to be investments to the public, doing investment banking activities, have it trade publicly, et cetera, or whether that's an internal mechanism by which a major institution is able to introduce efficiencies into their processes. But overall, what you're seeing is major adoption there, and you have to have the rails to be able to support that adoption. For a tokenized asset to be useful in the first place, it needs to be liquid and have the ability to be traded publicly, and Prometheum enables that.